All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. Maddie, can we please get a shorter intro for Meta Mondays, please? Well, guess what? You don't always get what you want in life, and I think that is a great sentiment and a great segue into our meta report here. It was PMPT number 19 this past weekend. Almost 750 people came out to compete, which is quite frankly awesome. People from around the world. Shout out to everybody that participated. Shout out to the moderators, the judges, the casters, everybody that makes this all happen. Very, very, very cool. Yeah, we're going to break down the results. We're going to go into all of the data, the statistics, the deck lists. We'll break it all down in today's video as we always do. But before we get into it, you got to go register for this upcoming weekend's PMPT tournament. It is PMPT number 20. Fantastical Fantasy, I suppose, is the name that we're going with. $200 USD cash prize pool. Link to register down in the description below. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Definitely go and sign up. Saturday, February 14th at noontime is when it starts. All right, let's get into the final standings. We'll break down the standings, and then we'll get into the all of the deck lists. And then at the end of the video, we go into our metagame data analysis. That's how it all breaks down. So here are the standings. Here you go. 1, 2, 3. And there we are. Yeah. So let's break this down here real quick. So shout out to Chandelure from Japan, 13-2, playing Greninja EX. And Suicune first place yet again. I say yet again. I don't think this player has won before, but it is yet another Suicune winning. I believe, what is it like? I guess it's just the first two tournaments of this new season, because this was sort of our second PMPT tournament since B2 released. Suicune getting the win again. It was a bit different, to be fair. This is Greninja Suicune instead of Suicune and Greninja. I know some people always scoff at me when I say that. They are different decks, and we'll break down the deck list. There was actually one thing in particular different about this deck list that I think was very important. And we'll break it all down here soon. Second place is going to be Chippy G, 12-2-1, playing Hydreigon and Mega Absol. Hydreigon definitely still the most played deck of the tournament, for sure. Second place, lost in grand finals to Suicune in a crazy turn of events that I don't know if anybody really expected. It's not like we've ever seen that before. Very interesting grand finals, if we're just gonna flat out say it, but it is what it is. Third place, though, is actually, I think, to me, my favorite part about this weekend. And if anybody watched the tournament live streams, you definitely had a great time following along. This is going to be ABC1234 from Taiwan, 12-2, third place, made top 4, playing Mega Steelix and Indeedee, a really, really cool deck. We'll break it all down. Nemu from Japan. Japan had a great weekend, by the way. Shout out to everybody from Japan for participating. They all did quite well. Nemu here, 12-2, playing Hydreigon here, also made top 4. YFRHF from Japan, 11-2. He was playing Mega Altaria and Gourgeist, which is definitely sort of the new premier way or common way that people are playing Altaria. I think, honestly, a lot of people expected Altaria to actually maybe win this weekend. Things just didn't necessarily pan out. I do think Altaria was sort of that premier kind of top 3 deck that had kind of entered back into the metagame. This new Gourgeist version, definitely pretty nice at fending off the Oricorio stuff. Had a pretty decent run. This is the highest placing player here from Japan. In 5th place, Suicune and Greninja DNT MJ Marnell from Italy. Shout out to Italy in 6th place. And then a couple more Hydreigons, FGR, Ivy from Colombia, and then PXG Eloquitas from Peru. I might have said all of those names wrong, and I apologize, but shout out to all of them. Hyped Puffer, also playing Altaria here, 9th place in Brazil. And yeah, if we go down, that was effectively every single deck in top 16. Once we get outside of top 16, that is, you know, things start to look a little different. But yeah, this one Steelix player, ABC, was kind of the standout player here within top 16. Everything else is kind of what we expected. There was one Altaria Greninja, which is still a deck that is quite scary. Probably deserves to see more play. And there was another one down here, Darkus as well. So what is this? Victor Cito from Spain, as well as Darkus from Spain, still playing Altaria Greninja just outside of, well, he got 16th place, actually. And then he was just outside top 16 in 20th place. We had James 732, the highest placing Blaziken from France, 821. We had a Charizard here in 22nd place. We had a Chandelure Meowth, 8-3 here in 24th place. So top 32 definitely saw some more interesting decks. Magnus and Oricorio finding a placement here. Architect from Italy in 26th place. And then in 31st place, we have Ningen Shikaku was playing Mimikyu. So Mimikyu kind of sneaking into top 32 as well. Of course, all of these other archetypes played much less this weekend, right? So we always talk about it. You know, the decks that see more play just have a better odds, a better chance of placing higher in the standings, just from a mathematical perspective. And we kind of saw that reflected this week, right? So a lot more variety once we get outside of top 32. And then, of course, just overall in top 64, we're going to see some Kangaskhan's down here, a couple more Mimikyus, Giratina Darkrai, Gardevoir, right? This is definitely where it becomes a bit more expansive in terms of the decks that kind of, were able to participate in day 2, even at a Crobat as well. None of them went that far into the tournament. Once again, top 16 entirely dominated by the 3 major archetypes in the metagame being Hydreigon, Suicune, Greninja, and Altaria. Now, you might imagine that Suicune Greninja maybe saw a little bit more play after winning last weekend, but that's really not the case. It was actually like only 5 or 6% of the tournament's meta share this weekend, but yet again, getting first place. In fact, well, technically it was Greninja Suicune, which is an even less common deck. This is actually kind of a bigger deal than you might think. Again, we'll break down the intricacies. So again, a lot of people are going to think that, same stuff, nothing's really changed, but there are a lot of really interesting things to talk about. Once you kind of get below surface level, there's actually quite a bunch of interesting things that have, developed over the last week or so. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And let's get into the deck list. So first up is going to be Channa's deck from Japan. This is the #1 deck of the tournament, first place. This is Greninja EX and Suicune, which, again, people always laugh, but it is effectively a very different deck. It operates very differently than if you're playing Double Water Shuriken. And the reason it's different is that just the flow of your board state, oftentimes you are attaching to that Froakie, if Suicune's in the active spot, because you can just sort of go into Greninja EX and then, come in without having taken any damage. Greninja EX has more HP, Giant Cape, Greninja's 190 plus Indeedee Ping, actually is 210 HP, which is a relevant number, especially when you combine that with Irida. You can live 2 hits from a lot of different Pokemon. Mega Steelix is one example that definitely was very relevant in the metagame. But one thing that definitely stands out to me, and I think that was very impactful for this player's run throughout the tournament, was Guzma. That's right, I already know it. I already know all of the Guzma stands, all of the people. We've had people commenting the last 6 weeks saying, Guzma's the card. More people need to play Guzma. Guzma's underrated. For all of those people that always comment that stuff in the comment section, this is your time. Stand up. Be loud, be proud. Guzma getting first place here. It was a very impactful card for a multitude of different reasons. The Mega Steelix deck, like this deck list, actually, I think beat Mega Steelix in top 4, and it was probably one of the more interesting interactions. That Mega Steelix deck, we'll break it all down, was really storming through this tournament. It just so happened that one Steelix player ended up playing a double Greninja EX Guzma version of Suicune, which really did end up being sort of a definitive factor here. The extra HP for Greninja, the Iridas and Indeedees allowing you to live 2 hits from that 120 damage Mega Steelix. Guzma being able to discard the heavy helmets. It was definitely a very impactful card here. And then as well into the Hydreigon in Grand Finals, which we'll break down next, which was playing Poison Barb Nihilego. So Guzma, very, very impactful. I think was pretty imperative to winning actually both of the top 4 in Grand Finals matchups for this deck list. Again, that Grand Finals match was widely it was quite the match, is all I'll really say. You can go back and watch the stream VODs if you want to see what happened there. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is still Suicune, and it's Water Shuriken. Most of the time, I would say the Double Water Shuriken version of Suicune is definitely considered to be the better deck list, just because it really does rely on that win condition, right? Which a lot of decks do, which is Greninja, Water Shuriken, Cyrus, combo to KO whatever you want, and then you win the game. And that's really the concept here. Now, the reason why I actually like this Greninja version and not the Double Water Shuriken version is because, you'll notice this in these upcoming decks, is that a lot of decks are actually getting rid of Indeedee, right? Indeedee is certainly one of the best cards in the game. It's very applicable. You can play it in so many things. As we've seen, Indeedee's seen play in virtually every deck you could imagine, whether it's Suicune or Hydreigon or Altaria or anything else for that matter. But with the inclusion of Lucky Ice Pop, and this is something that we'll have to break down more here when we get into the next deck. Lucky Ice Pop is a card that I think a lot of decks are sort of replacing Indeedee with, which to be fair is retroactively nerfing Suicune and Greninja pretty heavily, in the sense that these decks are not having an Indeedee on their bench, which means it's just less of a liability. Indeedee is sort of a really good card, but it's a massive liability into really any Greninja deck, because they can kind of just ping it, bring it up, KO it for 2 prizes, and that oftentimes is a win condition for decks, or for Suicune or any Greninja deck. playing up against, other decks that are using Indeedee. You know what I mean? So Indeedee, a very good card, but a very big liability, and I think some decks are definitely negating that liability by swapping Indeedee for Lucky Ice Pop, and we'll talk about that here next. But the first place deck list, double Greninja EX with Guzma. Again, just not something that many people are playing. Over time, the Suicune Greninja decks have become very, very standardized. They're becoming they're very variable, or less, they're not becoming variable, you know what I mean? They're very standard. And this is definitely sort of a difference here, right? So, and again, I know it's small differences, right? Just sort of a couple changes to the standard Suicune and Greninja deck, but has a very large influence on how it interacts with some matchups. So this is an interesting progression here. People are going to roll their eyes. They're going to say Suicune wins again, but it really is a different deck. It is a different deck, and that is at least something interesting to note. But next up, let's talk about the second place deck here, which is going to be Chippy G's deck, which is Hydreigon. Hydreigon definitely becoming a bit more standardized, but there's one thing that terrifies me about Hydreigon moving forward, and that is, of course, going to be this guy right here. If you can't see my cursor, it is the old Lucky Ice Pop. I mean, I'll tell you what, guys. The last thing I think Hydreigon High Roll needed was just a couple of item cards that potentially can full heal your Pokemon. Just sometimes, If you didn't think this deck could get any more high roll, you're wrong. And not only is this deck even now just more high roll with Lucky Ice Pops, but on top of that, we're not even playing Indeedee. So, this inclusion, this sort of change to Hydreigon to me is actually really impactful, because traditionally what we've seen is Hydreigon, be, probably the most common deck in the metagame, but always sort of had a slightly losing win rate into Suicune and Greninja for various reasons. One of the biggest reasons is that Mega Absol is a target. If you put it on your bench, your opponent can just sort of, listen, I don't even care here. I'm just going to ping this Absol until it's ready to get KO'd. I'll bring it up, KO it, game's over. So Mega Absol's always been a liability, but one of the biggest liabilities that this deck has, or had, I should say, was that Indeedee EX on the bench, right? Because if you're playing up against a Greninja, it's a free 2 prizes, right? So that Indeedee, even though of course very useful, was a massive liability into that Suicune and Greninja matchup. And now we've cut it from the deck list, which actually does make this deck not only more high roll and just absurd with Lucky Ice Pops, but what it also does is actually sort of even out that matchup into Suicune and Greninja. I think we saw that this weekend. Hydreigon operated at about a 48 or 49% win rate into Suicune, which effectively is a coin flip, which is, at the end of the day, what this deck is. It's just a coin flip, which I think is why a lot of people are playing this deck. One, I think that it just doesn't require a lot of consideration. I think that when you play this deck, you're just going to do what the deck does. And I don't think the strategy is very different in any scenario. It really is just high roll. This is what high roll is now in the metagame. There's really nothing else in the game that is high roll that is nearly as popular. That's what this is. It's rare candy high roll. It's Lucky Ice Pop high roll. It's everything you can imagine. People always ask me or sometimes they ask what I mean by high roll. And typically I just consider high roll decks as like, just sort of really RNG-based decks. Sometimes they're absolutely insane if you draw all of the cards you need, and sometimes they do literally nothing, which is like what this deck is. It just sometimes is absolutely dreadful. You either don't get rare candies, or you don't get Hydreigon, or you lead Mega Absol and you go first. Like, there's so many things about this deck that can be absolutely horrible. Or sometimes you can go first, turn 2, rare candy, Hydreigon, Lucky Ice Pop, heal 120 damage, and there's nothing in the game that can stop you from winning. So that's what I mean. This is definitely the most RNG high roll deck in the game, further compounded now with the inclusions of Lucky Ice Pop. And we saw this. We saw this in the live stream. I believe this Absol got about 120 healing in one turn with Lucky Ice Pops, which is the last thing you want, right? When you're playing Hydreigon, that's not what you want to be what's going on in the meta. But you know what? It's strong, and in a tournament play, if enough people play this deck list, someone's bound to get lucky, someone's bound to draw the cards and just sweep through the tournament, which is, almost what's happened over the last couple of weeks, except, luckily the Suicune players, I say luckily, but, the Suicune players have kind of stopped that from happening. So back-to-back weeks, Hydreigon loses to Suicune in the finals, which, again, I think does narrow down to the fact that Suicune is just hyper consistent. If it was a best of 5 match, I think Suicune would have definitely even had a better chance of winning. It's just the nature of Hydreigon, and I think for the most part, Suicune Greninja just has a winning matchup into it, but that's becoming less and less prominent now, I think, with Lucky Ice Pop and just the sheer ridiculousness of what this card is. And I think that this is a big factor, because we're going to see Lucky Ice Pop in the 3rd place deck list, which was probably the biggest significant factor for the results this weekend, which is Steelix. Let's talk about this deck, because this is literally Mega Steelix and Indeedee And that's the deck. Like the whole concept here is to get into Mega Steelix, put that heavy helmet onto it. You know, you have the double Indeedee heals, you have PCL, Pokemon Center Lady, you got Lucky Ice Pops, and you know, the damage you're taking is minus 40 every turn. And when you have a 220 HP and Indeedees are healing you for 80, it's quite difficult to get around this 120 damage attack that just seemingly just is happening every turn. Now, the thing about this deck is that it's also kind of high roll in a weird way. It's slow roll, high roll. This is like a very traditional like mid-range deck. It's basically like, hey, I'm trying to achieve this very particular board state, and I don't really have a way to get there really quickly. It's basically the opposite of something like a Hydreigon in the sense that, you know, it's a very linear deck list, and there's some RNG involved, but at the end of the day, you know, if you go enough turns, like you're probably just going to get into Mega Steelix. We are playing Brock, right? Which Brock is definitely the card I think that allows this deck to get up and running a turn or sometimes 2 turns earlier, which is a really big factor in some matchups, right? So, you know, in a best of 3 set in a tournament where you play 8 different games or whatever, like some of those games you are going to get like double Brocks early and you get the turn 3 Mega Steelix and you're feeling absolutely incredible about your chances, right? You get the Indeedees on the bench and you're just chilling, right? And Lucky Ice Pop gives this deck some high rolls. Sometimes you're healing for 180 damage with Ice Pop, you know, and it's GG, which again, you know, we're going to talk about this deck list in the sense that, like, why is this deck now seeing play? Or why did it do well this weekend? Even though maybe not many people played it, and none of these cards are really new. The only new card in this deck is, in fact, Lucky Ice Pop. So you might be thinking, like, is that really what kind of put this deck over the edge? And honestly, and I might be wrong about this, but I really do think Lucky Ice Pop probably is that card. Because you got to think, like, if you're not playing Ice Pops in this deck, what are you playing? Are you playing Potion in place? Is that what you're playing? Or are you maybe playing, I don't know, like what else, right, would fit that slot? There's really nothing else in the deck that you could play that's necessary. Some people might be telling me, oh, he could have played Cyrus. Cyrus maybe would have won in the game. This is definitely a deck list that seemingly did struggle into Suicune. And the reason for that is because you can't really one-hit KO anything on Suicune's board. If they get Greninja EX out, they can sort of just pivot. They can just go in between Pokemon all game and take forever. But what we saw was that this deck list and this player actually beat a Suicune and Greninja. They actually did. They beat Suicune and Greninja, and I believe in top 8 or maybe top 16. And the way they won that is by quite literally just out surviving. Like it just, you know, even if you just had one Indeedee on the bench, like it didn't matter. Like the minus 40 damage every turn plus PCLs plus Ice Pop, 220 HP. It was actually enough to just sort of outlast the infinite retreat of Suicune and Greninja, which is quite frankly insane that a deck list like this could beat Suicune and Greninja without playing one copy of Cyrus. So I do think it's possible. However, it lost to the Greninja Suicune deck, and this is why that deck was such an important thing to consider. Because if that player was playing just a standard Suicune and Greninja deck, this Steelix might have gone to Grand Finals. It might have won the whole tournament. So it just so happened that it was a double Greninja EX deck with Guzma that ended up getting the W, which I think is actually a really important factor. Those are really small changes that ended up having a really significant impact on this particular interaction, on this matchup, and I think that was a big reason why they were able to go into Grand Finals and ended up beating Hydreigon. So yeah, this is a very interesting deck, and I think, again, decks like this can utilize Lucky Ice Pop possibly better than anything else, right? You got to understand that this is a deck that is going to take small amounts of damage over time, right? So the effect of a if you get a lucky Ice Pop, it's going to be even more impactful, right? Because you're taking such less damage every turn, right? If the game goes long, you know, if you get a 60 healing Lucky Ice Pop, like that could help you out to surviving 2 or 3 more turns. You know what I mean? It's actually just a card that is exponentially more useful in a deck like this with all of the damage reduction. And Indeedee here, the healing, it really just kind of adds up to B damage reduction. So when you have double Indeedee, heavy helmet, Steelix, you're taking minus 80 every turn. That's the truth. And unless you're playing something that can just one-hit KO, like it really ends up being something that's difficult to get around. You know, the average Suicune attack's dealing 100 to 120 damage max, you know, with Greninjas. So, like, the fact that that turns into 20 or 40 damage means that you're going to be taking a lot of attacks from Mega Steelix. And God forbid, you know, they do heal 100 damage off of a Lucky Ice Pop because the game's over. So, Lucky Ice Pop is, I think, a card that is so impactful to a strategy just like this. Which is funny because we've seen decks almost very identical to this. Remember Goodra? Remember that Goodra deck? Very similar in a lot of ways. I do think that the Brock package, like the Brock engine for Onyx and Mega Steelix, is kind of a meme scheme. Like it is really silly and it doesn't feel that great, but it's better than nothing. And it does actually kind of give this deck, again, just a little bit more potential pace, which can be the difference, right? If you can get that 120 off a turn earlier, like that could be the difference between you winning and losing. So what we did see was that, like Indeedee is still a liability, right? In this deck list. When you're playing Suicune Greninja, you're forced to not bench double Indeedees because they play double Cyrus, which means you're going to lose the game eventually. So you have to kind of go one Indeedee and hope that they don't, draw into the Cyrus win condition early enough. So that's one thing here. But as we saw, the Steelix was able to get through a Hydreigon, was able to get through Altarias, was able to get through Suicune and Greninja. It really ended up taking the double Greninja EX Guzma deck to take this down, which, you think about it as unfortunate, fortunate, however you want to look at it. But the run that this player had on the live stream was absolutely phenomenal. One of the most fun things that I've watched in quite some time. Yeah, so, I mean, that's kind of how I'm feeling here. And I think Mega Steelix, this deck list in particular, has a lot of potential. I do. Now, I think it's high roll in the sense that, this deck is slow. It's a very slow deck, which means that you don't always get all of the cards you need by turn 4 or turn 5. We saw that a couple of times. Sometimes he'd have 6, 7, 8 cards in deck and not have a single Mega Steelix, right? Which is just the nature of this deck, that sometimes like you need the Steelix. Like it just, an Onix can't stick around for 5 turns and expect to still be alive. And you are kind of very committal. Like you have to do one thing and hope that it works out with this deck. You can't split energies across Onyxes. Like if one of your Onyxes goes down before you can find Steelix, like you're down 3 energies. The game is over, which is something that I think this deck list can struggle with, which is why I kind of consider it a little bit of a high roll strategy, but it's a very slow deck, very slow burn, mid-range, late game deck, which I think we are sort of lacking in the metagame, which is always kind of fun. And you kind of want these strategies to exist, I think, in the meta, because for the most part, all of the decks in the metagame are either like explosive high roll decks like Hydreigon, they're like kind of aggressive strategies, or they're very consistent sort of tempo-based decks like Suicune or Altaria, right? Like everything kind of functions on that turn 2 to turn 3 range. And this is really the only deck that I've seen for quite some time that can operate outside that range but still be effective. And I find that to be definitely really cool. So, listen, a 3rd place finish for Steelix at almost an 800 player tournament. Is it a coincidence? Potentially, right? There's definitely some RNG aspects here, but is this a deck where if 10 to 15% of the tournament was playing it, would it be more successful? Would it be populating all over the standings? I think so. I think that this is a deck that actually, again, with the RNG aspect of Lucky Ice Pop is something that can just always win. You know what I mean? So that's I think the reality of it. I think when we kind of go back and we analyze this new metagame, we're probably going to see that Lucky Ice Pop is potentially the most influential card in the game. Why did they release Lucky Ice Pop? I don't know. I really don't understand it, but it is definitely more effective for decks like Mega Steelix than it would be for like, Suicune or whatever. But theoretically, you could swap Indeedee and Suicune for Lucky Ice Pop. You could, but it's a little bit more of an effective strategy in compounding decks that are playing Indeedee and Lucky Ice Pop and damage reduction like Steelix. But yeah, I think Hydreigon also utilizes it, which is very toxic, quite frankly. Very, very toxic. Let's take a look here at YFRHF's deck from Japan. This is going to be Altaria, and this is just sort of a new way that people are playing Altaria. One thing you'll notice here, though, is that no Chingling. So there are 2 different ways here that people are going with this Gourgeist Altaria package. You're either playing Meloetta to draw your Pokemon, thin out your deck very effectively, or you're playing Chingling to Chingling lock. And quite frankly, I think that Chingling is still sorely needed in the metagame. I think that there's just enough rare candy stuff, whether it's Greninja or Hydreigon. Like, I really think Chingling is something that should see more play. I've been saying it time and time again, but, at the end of the day, like, do people care? Like, I think if every single person that was playing Hydreigon just played like a Chingling deck, the meta would look very different, but people don't want to play Chingling. They don't want to play Item Lock and Mars and play that strategy. They want to go turn 2 Hydreigon Rare Candy. Like, that's what people want. You know what I'm saying? And I think the whole Chingling strategy kind of requires a little bit more thought than people maybe give it credit towards. Do you have Mars in hand? Like, are you playing that red card? Are you holding it in hand? Are you hoping you don't get Mars before they Mars you so you can Mars them to 1? Are you going to let that second Chingling go down? Like, what are we doing, right? Like it's definitely not the most like concrete strategy in the world. But I do think Chingling is broken. But Meloetta is also a broken card, right? So we're not going to sit here and discredit the power of drawing an additional Pokemon every turn with Meloetta. It's very, very strong. Very, very good. So I think that that's also a really viable strategy. And, you know, one Jirachi I think is also kind of relevant, right? We're playing one Cyrus, one Sabrina, one Jirachi. I love it. I love Altaria. Mega Altaria traditionally does have good matchups. Like this is a winning deck into Suicune, Greninja, and Hydreigon. So you would think like maybe why didn't it do better? Honestly, I think maybe more people should have played Chingling, but it's also luck of the draw. You know, Hydreigon, Suicune, they can beat anything at any given time. So even if you have a 52% win rate or whatever into those decks, you could very easily lose, which, you know, is sort of what happens sometimes. So I love the new, I guess, version of Altaria. I love the fact that we've teched in Gourgeist so that we can kind of get around the Oricorio stuff, because that was really the one thing holding these Altaria decks back, was that you kind of auto-lost against Oricorio, which never felt good. Right? When you ask players which deck do they want to play, like, are you going to play the deck that auto beats Oricorio or the deck that auto loses against Oricorio? And here we are, or where we've been over the last couple of weeks is everyone playing Hydreigon. So the answer to that question is very apparent to me. Yeah, one Training Arena, one Peculiar Plaza. I also like Altaria because it utilizes the stadium cards. Not many decks in the game utilize the stadium cards, but some of them do. Altaria is definitely one of them, which I love. So yeah, this is sort of a new version of Altaria here. Again, no Chinglings. But again, Meloetta is a broken card, so you're trading sort of one advantage for another advantage, and I think that this Altaria deck is definitely pretty quality. Let's take a look at DNT DJ Marnell's deck from Italy. This is going to be the highest placing Suicune Greninja deck, which is the standard. This is the Suicune Greninja deck that you'll see, at least before the tournament, at least, you would see like everywhere, right? The very standardized version. Double Water Shuriken. No Guzma, Double Cape, Double Cyrus, Mars, Irida. This is like the very baseline standard Suicune Greninja deck, which is still, again, a very, very, very good deck. Less good. Like the Double Water Shuriken stuff, I think, is less viable in a little bit because we're playing less Indeedee, right? The Hydreigons are not playing Indeedee, so it's like it eliminates a win condition. You'd maybe rather play, you know, a Guzma and double Greninja EX. You know what I mean? It's an interesting thing. Let's just kind of skip all the way down here because these are all just the same archetypes. Maybe some of these Altarias are playing Chingling. Yeah, like this is a version of Altaria that's playing Chingling instead of Meloetta, right? So you can play the Lycia package, which, you know, kind of fills the gap a little bit. Like if I were to play this deck, this is the version I would choose because I value Chingling a lot. Chingling, Mars with Lycia package, you know, Rocky Helmet, Training Arena, so some extra damage modification in here. Like this is what I would play, and I would feel a little bit more comfortable into Hydreigon and into Suicune. Just me personally. I'm not telling you which is better. I'm just saying this would be my choice if I had to pick. No, Jirachi's a little suspect, but Sabrina's still a good card even without Cyrus, even still a good card even without Jirachi. So I like that version of Altaria as well. In fact, I really like that deck a lot. Let's go down here to, I guess, PGX Victor Cito's deck from Spain. Altaria Greninja here. And yeah, I mean, let's talk about Altaria Greninja a little bit because this is a deck people are familiar with. I think people have moved off it a little bit. It was something that was very popular actually last season, but really fell off a little bit. I think it has potential to rise back up. The thing with Altaria Greninja is that it's basically a more of a high roll version of Suicune and Greninja. Like that's what this deck is. Like when you think about it in terms of how it functions in the metagame, it's a deck that does very well into Hydreigon, but struggles more into Suicune, whereas the other Altaria deck is definitely closer to a 50-50 against both matchups. This is a deck that says, you know what, we're basically Suicune, but less consistent, so we're effectively kind of losing in the Suicune matchup, but we do play Chingling, that can kind of give us the advantage a little bit, but a very inconsistent deck overall, bit of a mixed bag, but always does have a really good matchup into Hydreigon, so that's sort of the calling card here for this Altaria deck. All of these Altaria decks, again, just sort of got pounded by the Steelix. Like the Steelix player really did kind of stomp a bunch of Altarias in top cut, which is kind of hilarious when you think about it. Out of anything that could have gotten hard countered this week, like the Altaria stuff was kind of a hilarious choice to get counterplayed, but it is what it is. At 21st place, we got James 732 from France. That's Blaziken. Let's take a look at Blaziken. Again, a deck I really like. I think Blaziken's very underrated, but it's just one of those things where, you know, if we're playing Blaziken, like why not play Hydreigon? It really is just a very similar deck, but different in some ways. So the advantages of playing Blaziken over Hydreigon, it just depend on your matchups, right? You're playing a Pokemon that has more HP, doesn't damage itself, and you have access to Lily. Like that's the advantage. That's the difference. Effectively, though, they operate as like the same exact deck. And with Hydreigon, you have less HP, you deal damage to yourself, but you're a single prize Pokemon. You're only worth 1 point, and Blaziken is worth 3 points, which inherently I think does make Hydreigon better. Not to mention is the Oricorio matchup. So I think that is also another big factor here for Blaziken. Yes, we have Blaziken's Burn, we got Rocky Helmets, but you know, at the end of the day, like Hydreigon doesn't have to worry at all about Oricorio, where Blaziken, it can be a little bit, you know, it can be a little bit iffy. But I do like Blaziken. I think it's a strong deck. Charizard. Charizard and Entei here, 22nd place. You know, Charizard is a deck that honestly is not a bad deck. Like Charizard, I think also is still waiting for its turn. You know, it's just sort of an awkward thing here. I think Charizard doesn't love playing Oricorios, but it also doesn't love Hydreigon. Like at the end of the day, you know, like dealing 250 doesn't really matter when you have to go through like 2 Hydreigons, you know, and an Absol or whatever. You're dealing 50 damage to yourself. So there's some matchups that Charizard loves and actually excels in this active metagame, but there's also some matchups where, you know, it's just not, the 250 on a Mega Pokemon is just not doing it. You know, you're getting KO'd in 2 hits by Hydreigon. Like, you just don't want that matchup. And, you know, I really think Hydreigon is sort of the counter Mega Pokemon in a lot of ways. It's just the card that is competing in the metagame that can sort of just beat a lot of Mega decks just by the inherent nature of the card, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, shout out to Mega Charizard, definitely still a quality deck. And let's skip down here to Chandelure, which I love. I love this Chandelure deck. Again, I don't know how many people played this. This is Pokemon Champ from the United States, Pokemon Champ 9. I love Chandelure. This is a really fun deck. This is a deck that doesn't seem like it can be or should be competitively meta viable, but it is actually a really strong strategy. We've talked about it before. Maybe we'll highlight it sometime this week. But yeah, Chandelure here with Meowth, you card draw, you stall, you get supporters in the discard pile, and then you come in and you start 1-KOing Pokemon. It's really fun. It is a fun strategy. Again, it can be a little bit suspect into Hydreigon. You know, the giant cape's kind of needed so that you don't get 1-KO'd by Hydreigon, but it's a really fun deck, and it's a really interesting strategy, something that I think definitely deserves to see a little bit more play. And I think it's really the only other, like, it's similar to Hydreigon, but it's very different in the sense that it's a stage 2 single prize attacking Pokemon. But it plays almost the exact opposite of Hydreigon, where you kind of set up and you sweep here with Chandelure, where Hydreigon just comes in immediately and puts too much pressure on, so you end up losing the game. So it's like the other side of the coin, you know. That's the dichotomy here of the Chandelure Hydreigon interaction. You know, they really are like complete opposites, but they are very similar in terms of like the composition, right, of what type of Pokemon they are, which is, you know, a stage 2 single prize Pokemon, which is cool. It's cool that we have this in the game. Dark, Psychic, you know, there is definitely like a comparison there, you know what I mean? Which I love. I love Chandelure. It's a fun deck. I'd have to break down the matchups for it. I don't know if it's seen enough play for us to use that data effectively, but we'll take a look later. Magnezone or Oricorio, I'm not even going to take a look at Architect's deck because we know what it is. It's the same deck. Shout out to Magnezone or Oricorio. Again, anybody choosing to play Magcorio in a metagame completely dominated by Hydreigon is just an absolute mad lad, so shout out to him. And then lastly, let's take a look at Ningen Shikaku's deck, 8 and 3. And this is Mimikyu, which again, a very, very good deck. Most people are playing Mimikyu with Giratina and Greninja just because we talked about this actually in the video where we highlighted and specifically covered Mimikyu previously last week. I love Mimikyu. I think it's a broken card, and it actually has a really great synergy and interaction with Greninja. So I actually think that this is something that is completely meta. Hasn't necessarily caught on a ton. Again, not something that really loves Hydreigon. And at the end of the day, if everyone's just going to be playing Hydra, you know, it's going to limit the creativity of decks that can, you know, kind of be effective in the metagame, which is why, again, I talk about all the time, like, hey, maybe we should cool it with the Hydreigon stuff. Like, I do mean that. But at the same time, people can play whatever they want. You know, maybe Hydreigon wins next week. You know, it's been 3 months or whatever, 2 months, 3 months, I think, since Hydreigon won a PMPT tournament. But that doesn't mean it's not a strong card and a strong deck. So, you know, I'm not going to discourage anybody from playing it, but I really love this Mimikyu deck. I think it's phenomenal, but I don't think it likes the Hydreigon matchup. I could be wrong about that, but like, I just don't imagine it appreciates that matchup very much, you know, with Giratina and Greninja, right? But I could be wrong. Anyway, we'll break it all down later. This deck's pretty standard. It's also playing a Lucky Ice Pop because Lucky Ice Pop is a broken card. And anyway, that's the standings. Those are the deck lists, guys. So what we're going to do here to wrap up the video is break down the data. We're going to get to the bottom of things. We're going to talk about the actual numbers. And people oftentimes take a look at the standings and they think, all right, that's the story. That's what happened. These are the decks. But that's not necessarily the case. So let's break it all down here. Let's get into the metagame data. If you made it this far in the video, shout out to you. Thank you so much for watching. I love doing this. I really do. I do it every week. There's a reason why we're still here after 100 Meta Mondays or whatever it's been. It's been an interesting run. I love it. I love the video series. Let's get into it. The metagame tab here. And what do we got? Well, yeah, we'll see about 50% of the overall tournament still playing Hydreigon, so it was the most played single archetype. However, if you were to combine both of these Mega Altaria variants, you'll see that they actually combined to be higher than 14%. So Altaria combined was almost 21% of the meta share. So Altaria as a Pokemon, especially if you add in, what is this, Greninja, it was definitely the most played Pokemon in the entire game, which is very interesting. However, without Gourgeist, I really think there's just too many things that kind of just beat Altaria. And I think that, you know, just this Altaria Chingling version, as we see a 45% win rate, you kind of just take the auto loss into a Oricorio, and I think overall your matchup spreads are just going to be a little bit less viable against a number of different things. So I think Gourgeist is really boosting Mega Altaria, and it's not just for Oricorio, it's just a good card in general. But at the end of the day, Altaria without any secondary attacking option to get around Oricorio is going to struggle a bit. But yeah, Altaria Gourgeist did really well. 242 to 215, 10.5% of the meta share. So actually a respectable performance. But what we're going to do is break down the matchups. So let's take a look at Hydreigon because I think that this is probably going to show us everything we need to know here. Which is, yeah, in fact, basically 50-50 into itself. That's pretty typical. 36 and 38. So Altaria Gourgeist, you know, it didn't really have much of a losing matchup. I think Gourgeist just makes that deck a little bit more of a liability into Hydreigon for sure. And then Suicune and Greninja here also 28 and 29, which is scary to me. Very scary because I think the Lucky Ice Pops really are leading Hydreigon to more of a 50-50 matchup, you know, into Suicune, which is kind of terrifying, but also at the same time really shows that the value that Suicune has in the metagame is becoming less and less. Honestly, I mean, if you consider that Suicune Greninja wasn't even the deck that won, it was actually Greninja and Suicune, then Suicune Greninja really did very poorly this tournament overall, but its matchups into Hydreigon are quite low. Hydreigon also 50-50. Actually, it has had a winning matchup into Altaria Chingling there. 17 and 8, so, you know, Hydreigon kind of gatekeeping Giratina Darkrai from entering back into the metagame. Giratina Darkrai really struggled from a win rate perspective, and I think a big reason for that is so many people played Hydreigon, and Hydreigon just beats Giratina Darkrai. So, again, a bit of a suspect thing there. 21 and 2 into Magnezone Oricorio. Again, I don't know why people are just maybe choosing to play Oricorio into a format heavily dominated by Hydreigon, but they went 21 and 2, so that's a 91% win rate for Hydreigon in that matchup. I think a big calling card for it, right? If this was the opposite, right? If you think about Hydreigon's position in the metagame and you were to swap this win rate and say, okay, you have an auto lose into Oricorio Magnezone, like the meta would look very, very different, which I think is a really big factor why people choose to play Hydreigon. We actually see a losing matchup into Mimikyu, so I was kind of wrong there. I think that actually Mimikyu maybe does somewhat well into Hydreigon, which is really cool. And then actually 6 and 10, so it does struggle into Altaria Greninja. Altaria traditionally does well into Hydreigon, so I think the Altaria Greninja deck kind of compounds that. And it dominates Chandelure, unfortunately, yeah. So Chandelure does definitely not appreciate that matchup. So a lot of the new stuff people are playing isn't really great into Hydreigon. Maybe Mimikyu has a chance, but that's been sort of the big factor. We went 5 and 7 into Daycare Kangaskhan, which is definitely interesting. 5 and 3 into Snorlax and Indeedee, which is very similar. We haven't talked about it, didn't place that high, but very similar of a deck compared to Steelix. It's the same deck, just Snorlax instead of Steelix. 4 and 1 into Gardevoir, so it beats Gardevoir. It's beating Blaziken and basically everything else. So that's the thing about Hydreigon. Quite frankly, is that yeah, there's just really nothing in the game that's kind of deterring people from playing it, which is always a little bit scary. Let's take a look at Mega Altaria Gourgeist matchups here, and we'll see about a 50, yeah, so about a 51, 38, and 36 into Hydreigon, like we saw, 50-50 into itself. It beat the Chingling version, which also kind of makes sense. 50-50 into Suicune as well, but look at this, 13 and 5 into Magnezone Oricorio. Look at that. The new Altaria deck really is extremely well positioned here. Very, very good matchup into Magnezone Oricorio. And I think, again, that's the biggest reason why we would play a Mega Altaria right now. So, again, all three of the top decks seemingly just are like coin flips into each other, which is funny. But some of them beat Magnezone Oricorio, Suicune doesn't. So, at the end of the day, like, why are we playing Suicune? That's a great question, right? Shouldn't we rather be playing Hydreigon or Altaria? But a losing matchup into Giratina Darkrai. And that's the only losing matchup out of anything, I guess, which is crazy. We lose to Buzzwole. And look at this. Yeah, we're losing to Greninja EX and Suicune, which is kind of an interesting thing to note, I guess. But a Greninja EX does match up pretty well into Indeedee. 0 and 3 into Steelix. Yo, shout out to Steelix. So maybe Steelix is the answer. Maybe that is sort of the new spice kind of added to the meta here to shake things up. Who knows? But I do think even though Altaria and Gourgeist here, again, if we look at the standings, it only made 5th place and 9th place and 11th. But I really think Altaria Gourgeist is probably the best overall positioned deck in the metagame, which is interesting to say, quite frankly. Let's take a look at Suicune and Greninja, which went 161 and 175. So this is not a good performance. Only 6.5% meta share and a 48% win rate is about as low of a performance for Suicune and Greninja than you could possibly imagine. We're going to see so many comments of people that did not watch this entire video, and they're going to be like, oh, Suicune, it's the best deck. But like, those people are completely so uninformed. It's actually insane. So shout out to you guys if you made it this far, because you'll actually know the real truth of the metagame here. Very low meta share percentage and a very low win rate. Let's take a look at Suicune Greninja's matchups here. And again, this is not the deck that won. It was Greninja Suicune that won. They are different decks. 50-50 into Hydreigon, 50-50 into Altaria. A losing matchup, though, into the Chingling versions. That does kind of make sense. Losing matchup into Magnezone or Oricorio. But it does beat Altaria Greninja, and definitely, oh, it beats Mimikyu a lot. Okay, so that's one answer there, I suppose. So Mimikyu just can't beat Suicune, which is interesting. So if that's really the thing that's stopping Mimikyu from being relevant in the metagame, then honestly, because Mimikyu has a lot of potential as well. So maybe we just maybe we move off of the Suicune stuff, guys. Maybe we really do. Even though, you know, like the matchup in Hydreigon's not great. Like, it's really nothing to call home about. And we still lose to Altaria Chingling. We still lose to Magnezone or Oricorio. We're losing to Giratina Darkrai a little bit as well. And it looks like Mimikyu's really the only like standout matchup, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, the performances for Suicune and Greninja are very, very poor. I mean, as bad as we've ever seen, which is hilarious because based around the results, people are probably going to complain about Suicune, but it is perhaps the least important thing like actively considered in the metagame, which is absolutely insane. It's crazy. So shout out to Suicune and Greninja for being basically a non-factor. Because in the standings, like, where was the highest Suicune? I guess one got 6th place and one got 12th place. And that's it. That's literally it. And then one got 29th place. So a very poor performance for Suicune and Greninja, which is very interesting, actually, now that I mention it. Let's go all the way down here. I am curious about Greninja Suicune. How many people played it? Like, where is it? Who played it? Who played the deck? Where is it? Greninja Suicune. Where is it? I can't even find it. How many people played this deck? Hello? Is it even on here? It is. One person? The one person that played double Greninja EX won the tournament? Is that what I'm seeing here? Yeah. That's crazy. That's insane to me. What an outlier. What an outlier that the only person that ended up playing this version of Suicune ended up winning. I mean, that's crazy. I don't know the last time we saw that. When was the last time a single player archetype won the tournament? It's got to be... I thought like at least like maybe 10 people played it. No, one person played this deck and they won? That's crazy to me. What did they play? They went 4-0 into Altaria, which does make sense. I mean, double Greninja does help the Altaria matchup quite a bit just because of the higher HP amount. 2-1 into Hydreigon, 1-1 into Chingling Altaria, 1-0 into Charizard, 1-0 into Steelix, 1-0 into Chandelure, Daycare Kangaskhan. I mean, literally the only matchups they lost was once into Hyrule Hydreigon and then once into Chingling Altaria. I mean, that's crazy to me. This is a very important progression. I mean, we got to keep that in mind. Like the one person played that? That's crazy to me. That's absolutely insanity. Giratina Darkrai struggled, and I don't think that the metagame's really well positioned for it because of Hydreigon. So you lose to Hydreigon, and you're losing to Altaria, which is crazy. Also hard losing to Chandelure, which does actually make a ton of sense. Yeah, so I don't really believe in Giratina Darkrai, but guess what? It does actually beat this Gourgeist deck, and it beats Suicune Greninja slightly. Traditionally, it always did, so that's interesting. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of Giratina Darkrai right now. I just think that there's just too much Hydreigon, and we have to accept that. Magnezone or Oricorio, only 4% of the tournament, and a 46% win rate is pretty bleak for our boy Oricorio, becoming basically a null factor here. It's most common matchups where Gourgeist, Altaria, and Hydreigon. The meta is not kind right now, I will tell you, to Magnezone or Oricorio. So honestly, guys, like the way the meta is going, Hydreigon's going to continue to see a lot of play. This new Altaria version is seeing a ton of play. Like I just really would not pick Magnezone or Oricorio. And I kind of knew that would be the case with Hydreigon alone. I didn't include it on our video Friday, and there's a reason for that. And I think that this is kind of telling me everything I need to know. But you still do well into Suicune and Greninja, so I guess that's something. But, you know, as we know, that's only 6% of the tournament meta share, so really not a big factor here. Any other big standouts? I don't really know. From a win rate perspective, does anything really stand out to me? How many people played Steelix? Because the one Steelix player did well. Was there only one Steelix? There was also only one Steelix. So 2 of the top 4 decks were one of decks in the tournament, which is crazy. This Steelix player went undefeated into Altaria, undefeated into Suicune Greninja, beat Mimikyu, beat Oricorio Greninja, which is crazy, beat Obstagoon, beat Jolteon, and its only losses were once to Hydreigon High Roll and then once to double Greninja Suicune. So yeah, that's very interesting. Very, very interesting to me, guys. I know some people might not really think about it like that, but look at the standings. This is a one-of player. one player in the tournament played double Greninja EX and they won, and one person in the tournament played Steelix and they got top 4, they got third place, which are really, really crazy results. Like if you really consider it like that, I mean, the odds of that are absolutely insane. And if we filter by win rate, guess what? These are the standouts. These are the one of decks that really popped off, did well. Blaziken, actually, the 3 people playing Blaziken did quite well. So, I mean, again, Blaziken is a strong deck, definitely underrated. Let's see here. What else was, I mean, I guess, yeah, it was Greninja, Suicune, and Steelix. Look at this. I mean, 13-2 and 12-2. That's crazy. I mean, that's, I've never seen that. That might be the first time that's ever happened at the PMPT tournament. So shout out to these players. I guess there's really nothing else to take a look at. If we take a look at the day 2 conversion rates, we'll see that 30% of day 2 was Hydreigon. And it went 43 and 25. So yeah, it dominated day 2. Mega Altaria also dominated day 2, 19 and 12. Suicune Greninja continuing to do well in day 2, 16 and 9. So against the greater field, it does seem that Suicune Greninja probably isn't that well positioned, and that's because only 9 of them as well made day 2, but it performed well in day 2. So it is against the other top decks of the metagame. It is very relevant, but probably loses to some random stuff along the way. And nothing really stood out. I guess Altaria Greninja did well. That's 8 and 4 in day 2. Yeah, the Steelix player went 5 and 1, and then the Greninja EX went 7 and 0. But yeah, Altaria with Ndidi 3 and 1 actually. Did we take a look at this player? This is just pretty standard. Yeah, it's just standard Altaria from back in the day, which again is also still a good deck. Ndidi's still a good card. To be fair, there's not that much Greninja. Like maybe Ndidi still makes sense with Altaria. I don't really know. But anyway, that is all of the relevant metagame data. Let me know what you guys think. Again, people are probably going to roll their eyes at the standings at the beginning of this video, but if they watch through the end, I think they'd be greatly surprised by the deck lists, by the changes. The meta progresses, and I think that people just don't oftentimes look deeper, and that's one thing that I do, like, probably more than anybody else, is look at like all of these super fine details week to week, things that are changing, things that could really change the metagame, right? Because like when we take a look at these standings, like what does this tell us, right? Well, it tells us that, maybe double Greninja is kind of the wave. Like maybe Guzma in Suicune is a really, really good card right now. Maybe Mega Steelix is a card that's very unprecedented. And from what the greater data told us is that, traditional Suicune Greninja has been struggling a lot. And this new Altaria Gourgeist deck is actually extremely well positioned to be, a top 2, top 3 deck, top 1 deck potentially in the metagame. We did actually put it on the top of our tier list, which is crazy. Of our last tier list. So yeah, guys, that's Meta Monday. There it is. Second week of the B2 Fantastical Parade metagame. And yeah, I mean, there it is. What's crazy is that we only have like 2.5 weeks until the next set releases on Pokemon Day, which is kind of coming up pretty closely. It's the 9th. So Ranked comes out on the 11th, which is also pretty insane to me. I probably won't do a tier list tomorrow. I'll probably do a tier list. Well, I'll probably do a tier list next week. I'll do a ranked tier list next week. I'll probably skip a tier list this week, but we'll definitely do some gameplay showcases. We'll showcase some new decks here on the channel this week, and we'll go live for ranked. Ranked is coming back on the 11th, which is really fun. So anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to go register for PMPT number 20. Help move the meta along. Help progress the metagame. Come compete. It's going to be a lot of fun. $200 cash in the prize pool. I've been talking so much in this video. I feel sick. I actually feel ill. I've been talking so much. So let's wrap this up. Peace out, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.